Hello Summoners and welcome back to another ProGuides upcoming changes video. My name is Christoph and today I'm going to be going over all the upcoming changes that are planned for patch 9.24. Everything that I mention here can be found on the PBE right now or on the Riot dev boards, but please do keep in mind that nothing is set in stone and changes can be made before 9.24 hits the live servers. We'll make sure to keep you guys updated with all the confirmed changes in our patch rundown next week, so make sure to click that sub button if you want to see that. Also, there are a few notable changes which will target some of your favorite champions, like Senna, Ryze, Yuumi, Akali, Garen, and so many more, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Also guys, today's question of the day is which champion do you think absolutely deserves a nerf next patch? I personally think Nocturne is really strong right now in top, mid, and jungle, so hopefully he sees some changes soon. Let us know your answers down below. And before we get started, if you guys want to get into your dream division this season and show off to all your friends, then check out ProGuides.com using the description link below. If you're constantly getting destroyed in lane, do not worry. ProGuides is the #1 proven way to help quickly level up your League of Legends skills. Whether you're looking for tier lists, champion guides, coaching, or courses from your favorite pro players, ProGuides is where you will find them. All the great pro players support ProGuides, so what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below and start improving right now. Alright, to kick things off, we have 13 brand new skins that will be joining us on the Rift next patch. First up, we have the Sugar Rush skin line, which features Braum, Evelynn, Ziggs, and lastly, Zilean. Sadly, we will be missing Sugar Cane. Next up, we have the Dawnbringer skin line, of which first up is this beautiful Dawnbringer Karma skin. Then we have this amazing Dawnbringer Nidalee skin, and to finish off the trio, we have the majestic Dawnbringer Soraka. In addition to these skins, we also have this badass but really pricey Hextech Swain skin, so make sure to save up your gemstones for that. And the last skin line that will join us on the Rift in 9.24 are the Nightbringers. Firstly, we have Nightbringer Lee Sin, and of course the Prestige Edition Nightbringer Lee Sin. Next up, we have Nightbringer Vladimir, and then the polar opposite of the Dawnbringer Soraka skin, which is Nightbringer Soraka. And lastly, we have this insanely cool and powerful looking Nightbringer Aphelios skin. On that same note, Aphelios will be the latest champion to join the league roster in patch 9.24. Aphelios is a very unique champion who's unlike any other. Instead of having a standard Q, W, E, and R button, Aphelios only has 3 abilities. Well, kind of. Aphelios cycles through 5 weapons, which all have unique effects and their own cooldowns. We'll be releasing a super in-depth guide for Aphelios on our channel sometime soon, so make sure to click that sub button if you want to get notified. Also, if you want to check out all of his abilities and weapons, then make sure to watch our previous video, which covers every part of his kit and also reveals some new leaks about the next champion, an Ionian juggernaut named Set. Now, with all that being covered, let's jump straight into the balance changes. Let's start off with some rune changes. Conqueror was recently reworked at the start of the preseason, and it'll become very clear that this rune is a bit too powerful at the moment. Although it's pretty balanced among the bruisers and other melee champions on the Rift, it's actually a completely different story for the ranged ones. Champions like Cassiopeia, Ryze, Swain, and Brand have been completely abusing this rune for some easy freeload during patch 9.23. However, for patch 9.24, Conqueror will see some significant nerfs for the ranged users. Firstly, the healing amount has pretty much been cut in half for them and will be reduced from 15% damage dealt to 8%. In addition to that, the buff duration of this rune has been reduced from 8 seconds total to 6 seconds. These are both some really heavy nerfs for the ranged users, and it'll likely force them to stray away from this rune choice and go back to more traditional ones like Phase Rush. Next up, we have some changes coming to Omnistone. Conqueror and Omnistone were both newly reworked runes that were introduced to us at the start of the preseason. However, unlike Conqueror, Omnistone has been absolutely terrible, and anyone who selected this rune was borderline trolling. There have been a ton of complaints about this rune, and League players were demanding that they remove it or bring back the previous iteration, which was Kleptomancy. However, for patch 9.24, it looks like the Balance team are moving toward the RNG-style rune and are buffing Omnistone significantly. Firstly, Omnistone will tell you how much damage you dealt and how many buffs it has granted. Next up, there will also be some more bias towards the RNG depending on the current situation of your game. Here is the complete list. 1. You are more likely to get Predator when you are not near enemy champions and less likely to get it when in combat with enemy champions. You are also more likely to get Dark Harvest when you're near low HP enemy champions. Hail of Blades will also appear more often when you're near low health enemy champs if you're building AD or attack speed. Conqueror will be granted more often when you're near enemies who are high health. This chance is also increased even further if you are a melee champion. Next up, you are more likely to get Fleet Footwork if you are low health and below level 9. Then we have Glacial Augment, which will be granted if you have an active item off cooldown. And lastly, we have Summon Airy, which will appear more often when you have healing or shielding in your kit and you're near a low health target who is in combat. These changes will increase the win rate of Omnistone by a lot next patch, but it's still hard to say if it'll be enough to make Omnistone an actual rune instead of a complete meme. Let us know your thoughts about these Omnistone changes and give us your opinion on whether or not it'll be strong next patch. Now that all the runes are out of the way, we have one more non-champ related balance change, which is for the Rift Herald. At the start of the preseason, the balance team significantly shifted the focus of the game toward the bottom side of the map, specifically the Dragon Pit. In addition to this, they also nerfed the Rift Herald by a huge amount, which resulted in junglers only playing around bottom lane and completely ignoring the top half of the map. For patch 9.24, the balance team are looking to shift the focus of the game a little by buffing the Herald. Firstly, the charge damage for Herald has been buffed from 1500 to 2000. This means that you can finally be getting more than 2 to 3 plates off her charges. Next up, the charge damage per Herald level has been reduced from 175 to 125 to compensate for the buffs and to prevent any one-shot tower kills. Overall, this is a great change which will force junglers to treat the Herald as an actual objective rather than a minor inconvenience. Getting extra plates off the initial charge is really valuable, but the meta will still be in favor of playing around bot side for those juicy drakes. Alright, now on to the champion balance changes, starting off with the top lane. Oh god, here we go again. Akali has been one of the most problematic champions for the balance team during the past year. Most of the balance decisions for Akali have been extremely hit or miss, making her either insanely OP or just flat out worthless. For patch 9.24, it appears that the balance team have decided that Akali is way too strong again and will be nerfing her. Firstly, Akali's Q, 5-point strike, will have its hitbox reworked to no longer start from behind her character model. This means that it'll become a lot harder to hit the melee minions while also hitting the caster minions due to the hitbox only being a cone in front of her. In addition to this, the rank 5 Q bonus damage to minions has been lowered from 133% to 125%. This results in Akali being unable to one-shot the backline minions if she is behind. Overall, both these changes are very punishing for Akali players and will affect her clear speed significantly. The biggest impact that this will have is on her ability to roam around the map and make plays. Since Akali will struggle a bit to clear the wave, you'll have to get a lot smarter about your roams and have a deeper understanding of the game to not get punished by bad map movement. Next up on the top lane list, we have nerfs coming to a guy who definitely deserves them. None other than Garen. Ever since his rework, Garen has been a bit too strong due to his E being able to stack Conqueror. Although Garen was nerfed a few weeks ago, it appears that those changes were just not enough, and he's going to be nerfed again. Firstly, his E's spin per attack speed rate has been nerfed from 20% to 25%. In addition to this, the damage that his E deals has been nerfed from 8.2 to 6.6. These are both some decent nerfs to Garen's kit, which will lower his oppressiveness and damage in the top lane. However, our analysts do expect Garen to remain as a powerful top laner next patch, so you can continue playing him in patch 9.24. Lastly, for the top lane balance changes, we have some coming to our favorite champion, which is going to be Ryze. Ryze has been way too strong recently thanks to his 25th rework, which lowered his skill cap by a ton while increasing his damage output. During the preseason, a lot of pros and challenger players have raised their voices at how disgustingly broken this champion is, and then he might need another rework to fix him entirely. For patch 9.24, Ryze is receiving a few changes, and surprisingly, it isn't a rework this time. Ryze's Q overload will have its damage lowered from 80 to 180 to 65 to 165. This is a very small nerf to his kit, which will literally have almost no impact on his stance in the meta. He'll still be that insanely powerful mid to late game carry, who also has an extremely safe early game. In addition to that, these changes will almost be negligible once he hits level 6 and has a point in his ultimate thanks to its passive increasing your Q damage. So for all the Rise players out there, you can continue to play your comfort pick in patch 9.24 with almost no difference. Alright, now let's move on to the jungle. First up in the jungle, we have a small buff coming over to Amumu. Although he's not in the worst spot right now for lower elos, he's actually a terrible champion for the higher ones. In order to bring up his strength in the meta, Amumu's Q, Bandage Toss, will have its cooldown buff from 12 to 8 seconds to 10 to 8 seconds. This is a very minor buff, but it's welcome nonetheless. Next up in the jungle, we have a few buffs coming to our favorite little armadillo, Rammus. A few months ago, Rammus was one of the best junglers in the game, but his win rate has fallen off a cliff recently, despite having 0 balance changes. For patch 9.24, the balance team are giving him a little bit of love by increasing his base HP gain per level, while also buffing his E cooldown by a small amount. Both these buffs are very minor and will only affect his stance in the meta by a tiny bit, but hey, it's better than nothing, I guess. Okay, now let's run it down mid. Kassadin has been pretty oppressive in the mid lane thanks to the addition of the new Presence of Mind and reworked Conqueror. In order to put Kassadin in check, the balance team are making a few big nerfs to his kit. Firstly, his Q's cooldown has been lowered from 9 seconds flat to 11 to 9 seconds. Next up, his W mana restore has been reduced from 4 to 8% missing mana to 4 to 6%. Although it's only a 2-second cooldown nerf and a 2% mana nerf, it's actually going to be quite impactful on his stance in the meta. Kassadin heavily relies on his Q during the game to farm minions and even trade with his opponents. Having those 2 extra seconds off of his Q being down affects his trade patterns against specific matchups quite heavily, and will also bring down his overall CS. However, our analysts do believe that these nerfs are deserved because his win rate was getting out of hand. And lastly, for the mid lane, we have Corki and Azir, who are actually going to get buffed this patch, but those changes have been removed thanks to Conqueror being a bit too OP on them. However, the balance team have stated that they'll be keeping a close eye on their win rates after the new Conqueror changes hit the live servers. Next up, we have one ADC change, which is going to be for Sivir. Sivir has been in a rough spot in the meta recently due to her inability to keep up against the other meta ADCs like Caitlyn, Senna, Ashe, and Miss Fortune. However, for next patch, Sivir will receive a 2 base AD buff to help her out in the early game. This is a very small buff, and at best, she'll only move up 1 tier, but we'll have to wait and see to be sure. Make sure to click that sub button if you want to stay notified with her stance in the meta, because we'll be the first ones to update you on that. Okay, now finally with the supports. Okay, so first up we have the champion that everyone's been waiting for, which is Senna. Senna has been one of the strongest and most overloaded champions that Riot has released in a while. Her damage is just off the charts, and the amount of passives and utility that she can bring is just way too much. For patch 9.24, Senna will see a ton of nerfs made to her kit. Firstly, her base HP growth has been lowered from 85 per level to 75. Next up, her passive, Absolution, will have its soul drop change on minions lowered from 5.55% to 1.67%, and champion clones no longer drop souls. Then her Q, Piercing Light, will have its damage lowered by a huge amount from 50 to 170 with 0.5 scaling to 40 to 160 with 0.4 scaling. Next up, her W, Last Embrace, will have its root duration lowered during the early game from 1.45 to 2.25 seconds to 1.25 to 2.25 seconds. And lastly, Senna's ultimate, Dawning Shadow, has been buffed by a small amount as compensation from 0.4 shield and damage scaling to 0.5 for both. Overall, these nerfs are welcome, but honestly, they're probably not enough to balance her out in the meta. She'll likely still be a very oppressive support in the bottom lane, and her ban rate will still be quite high. Next up for supports, we have some huge changes coming over for Yuumi. Yuumi was recently gutted due to her presence in pro play, but it looks like the balance team are going to be giving her another shot and are making a ton of changes. This is pretty much a mini rework. Firstly, her passive Bop and Block will now restore 50 to 160 mana based on level, and the shield amount has been buffed from 50 to 300 to 50 to 400. Next up, her Q Prowling Projectile will have its mana cost increased by 10 at all ranks, the AP ratio nerfed by 0.15, the empowered base damage buffed, but the scaling nerfed, and the missile duration has been lowered from 3 to 2 seconds. Then her W, You and Me, will now have a 0.25 second channel cast time when attaching from an unattached state. In addition to this, Yumi no longer follows Summoner Spell Teleports, and immobilizing her will put this spell on a 5-second cooldown. Then, her Adaptive Force increase will be buffed significantly during all stages of the game. And lastly, her E Zoomies will have its cooldown buffed from 18 to 14 seconds to 12 to 8 seconds. Also, the mana cost will be increased from 30 to 70 to 100 to 160. The healing increased from 30 to 70 with 10% scaling to 70 to 230 with 30% scaling. The movement speed that Zoomies grants has been lowered from 25% to 15%, but it'll no longer decay, and also the charges have been removed. In addition to that, Zoomies will no longer do increased healing based on missing health, but will now grant 25 to 45% attack speed and also have its duration increased by 1 second. These Yumi buffs are huge, and they will surely bring her back into the meta. She will now no longer be that annoying person to play against, but she'll have some clear lines for counterplay thanks to the changes made to her W. I think these are very healthy buffs and nerfs for her, and Riot is stepping in the right direction with these changes. Next up for supports, we have another big change coming for Braum. Braum has been struggling in the meta recently due to the sheer amount of damage and poke that other supports provide. For patch 9.24, Braum will receive a ton of changes, most of them being buffs. Firstly, his base game per level has been increased from 87 to 98. In addition to that, his base HP regen has been increased from 8 to 8.5. Next up, his W will have its cooldown buff from 14 to 10 seconds to 12 to 8 seconds. Also, the mana cost has been buffed from 50 to 70 to 40 flat at all ranks, and the armor and MR granted to the ally has been nerfed, but the armor and MR granted to Braum has been buffed. Lastly, his ultimate will have its damage increased from 150 to 350 to 150 to 450, and the knock-up to the first target now scales from 0.25 to 1 to 1.5 seconds at all ranks based on the distance from Braum. Every other target hit is knocked up for 0.25 seconds. Once again, these are some great changes for Braum, which will help him out a ton. Not much more to say than this, so let's get on to the final change, which is going to be for Karma. Karma was nerfed a lot recently due to her oppressiveness as a top laner. For patch 9.24, her E will have its shield strength increased from 70 to 170 to 80 to 200. This is a really good change for support Karma, and it'll increase her win rate for this position while also keeping top lane Karma in check. Alright, that's it for the balance changes. Now let's talk about some upcoming reworks. We're not going to go too in-depth in these because we already covered the details in yesterday's video, so make sure to check it out if you want to see that. Firstly, Lux will receive a complete VFX rework for patch 9.24. All of her abilities are being changed to now give more clarity for both the user and the opponent. Also, these updated abilities look so good, and I cannot wait to play her next patch. The Diana rework is still in progress, and we're not sure if it's being released next patch, but we'll make sure to keep you guys updated when we find out. For those who are unaware, her E and her ultimate are pretty much being flipped, but if you want a more detailed explanation, then check out our previous video. Next up, the Wukong rework is also in progress, and this one won't be released for a long time. I'm sorry, guys. There are a ton of promising changes to his kit, so stay tuned and hit that sub button. Lastly, the Volibear and Fiddlestick reworks are also still in progress and won't be released until later in 2020. Anyways, that's going to be it for our upcoming changes video for patch 9.24. And as always, if you guys want to get better at League of Legends, then please use the description link below to go find yourself a challenger coach right now to identify what you are doing wrong and fix it. If you want to see massive improvements to your game, then click the link below. That's it for the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Good luck in your next few games, and we'll see you on the Rift.